Welcome to the first of three modules which are going to be looking at the physical body and its anatomy and physiology. Now, this is going to be more complex than the energy body that we looked at in a previous video. But before you start this, I want to reassure you that you do not need massively detailed knowledge. This is no way an attempt to turn you into a doctor. You don't need that level of knowledge. But the human body is incredibly complex. Basically, you've got the skeleton, you've got the muscles that anchor themselves onto the skeleton, you've got the organs within the body that provide various functions, and you've got the endocrine system, you've got the blood system, you've got the nervous system, and they all fit together in a way that, when you know about it, it actually almost seems miraculous that more doesn't go wrong. So, the level of knowledge that you need is very basic, but you do need an understanding of how all the bits fit together. If you haven't already got a first aider certificate, then I would actually recommend that at some point you look into doing that if you plan on working regularly with people in any work environment, whether you're giving reiki or whatever you're doing. First aid skill is always useful, and a first aid certificate will also give you a little bit more context for how the human body works together. So, another thing I need to say is that generally someone who comes to you for reiki will come because they have a particular symptom. Say you've got someone who has got lower back pain, which is very common. Although you may listen to what they tell you and think, oh, I know what's causing that, your role as a reiki therapist, as a reiki practitioner, is not to try and deal with the cause. All your role is to deal with symptoms. Now, you may have another qualification that means that you are qualified to maybe give dietary advice, give posture advice to someone where you feel that those are relevant. That's fine. You can do that, and you can also give reiki to help relieve the symptoms. But as a reiki practitioner, your role is not to try to diagnose. You're not allowed to. It's also not to give lifestyle advice that you think may help. It is literally just to deal with the issue that the person has come to you with. In a later module, we will be covering what I call red flag symptoms. That if somebody comes to you with this symptom, you need to know enough to say, I'm sorry, I think you need professional medical advice. So, we're going to start off with the very basics, which is the skeleton. And if we didn't have a skeleton, we'd not be very effective. The skeleton literally holds everything together, and actually in the form of the rib cage provides some protection for two major organs, the heart and the lungs. Now, you have in the written information a labelled diagram of the skeleton, which I've given you literally so that you can see properly how the skeleton is put together. I don't expect you to really be able to remember the names, but it can be quite useful to know that the carpal bones are in the wrist. So if someone comes to you and says, I've got carpal tunnel syndrome, you would expect the pain to be in the wrist. If someone comes to you and says, oh, I've got a problem with my cervical vertebrae, you know, after looking at this diagram, that the cervical vertebrae are at the top of the spine, so you're going to expect the pain to be in the area of the neck. I repeat, you don't need to really remember all the bones of the body. But it is worth pointing out that the skeleton is not just a support system. It actually it helps. The bone marrow is where blood cells are made, and the bones themselves are a place where minerals can be stored. So even though inevitably in these modules I'm going to be looking at every system separately, that they're really all interlinked, and we've just started to see that in a very simple way with the skeleton. Pain in the skeleton is actually very common. You can have things like osteoporosis, arthritis, slipped discs, broken bones. I've already mentioned carpal tunnel syndrome, and generally these kind of problems will report with pain. In fact, there is a whole group of painkillers that are designed for use with musculoskeletal pain. So hopefully you can now see that although the skeleton is there as a support, it can be a source of quite widespread illness. If the bone marrow isn't working properly, then you end up with leukemia. So it is actually very important support to the body in more than one way. Bones can be quite fragile, and breakages and fractures do happen, and they can be extremely painful. Sometimes the problem isn't caused by the bone, but by the cartilage, which is part of the skeletal system, which sits in between the joints. Cartilages are found in the kneecap. You have people who have torn kneecaps, so that's the cartilage gone. If someone's got a slipped disc, the disc that's slipped is the bit of cartilage in between the spine, the vertebrae of the spinal cord. So it isn't just bone, it's also cartilage. But without a good firm skeleton, you will have nowhere for the muscles that are so important to actually attach to. And the next system I want to look at is the muscle system. Again, there is a diagram of this in your notes. And again, I do not expect you to remember any of the labels. And I also need to point out that actually the muscles on that diagram only represent part of the muscles within the body, because the heart and the gastrointestinal system are also muscles. Muscles are to do with movement, and they control both the voluntary movements that we make when we decide to go out for a walk, pick up a cup, do martial arts, do qigong or whatever. And they also are important in lots of involuntary movements. Breathing, your heart beating, the digestive tract. So there's lots of muscles that you have that aren't shown as part of the musculoskeletal system. So muscles are far more widespread. And that in part explains why when anyone has a disease which affects how nerves and muscles interact, it actually can be a bit more widespread than just affecting how they move. Basically, muscles are all the major muscles that I've shown in the diagram are made up of tiny fibres, lots of fibres, and these fibres expand or contract as instructed to by the nervous system. You have to have a good blood supply to the muscles to ensure that there's enough oxygen and glucose and other things to enable the muscles to operate efficiently. And if you think about it, you will know that, or you will have heard athletes talking about, getting cramp. Well, that's caused by a build-up of lactic acid in the muscles, which is caused by a lack of oxygen. Those kind of problems tend to be self-limiting, but it's very easy for muscles to get inflamed, strained, pulled. They're connected to the bones by tendons, which can tear or can get strained or inflamed. Tendinitis, that's exactly what that means. And in a way, the pain that you get when you've got a muscle problem is actually part of the body's healing systems coming in. That doesn't really help you if you've torn a muscle and you've got pain. You just know that it hurts and you want the pain to go away. So there are a number of ways that the muscles can cause problems. And most, as I say, musculoskeletal pain is an extremely common symptom. And if you do start giving Reiki regularly, it's going to be something that an awful lot of people are going to mention to you, whether it's in the form of backache, neck ache, shoulder ache, joint pain. And there are a number of ways that pain can be caused. You can have accidents. You can drop something on your toe, which can maybe break the toe and strain the muscle. If you put too much strain on a muscle, it can also cause injury. That's what happens when an athlete doesn't warm up and they get a hamstring injury. About 2 or 3 years back, there was a rush of footballers with fractured metatarsals because of the new sort of boot they were using. So even when you're trying to be healthy, you can cause problems. So there are a number of different ways that pain can be caused. But some systemic illnesses can actually cause pain in the skeleton, in the bones and in the muscles. Things like osteoporosis, cancer if it's spread to the bones. If someone's had surgery, then they are going to have localised pain and inflammation at the surgery scar. It doesn't matter that we made the scar with the best of intentions, it still hurts. So almost any problem with bones or muscles is going to result in pain of some sort. Now, the third and last system I want to look at in this module is the digestive system. Again, there is a diagram of it in the literature that I've sent you. Again, I don't expect you to remember the names of the different parts, but what I do hope you get is, from looking at the diagram, is an idea for exactly how big your digestive system is and quite how curled up it is, and the fact that it literally goes from your mouth all the way down to your rectum. So it's actually a very, very important organ, and it's another area that very commonly causes problems. You can have things like diarrhea, you can have things like constipation, you can have inflamed gut with things like inflammatory bowel disease. The basic role of the gut is to ensure that the food that you take in gets broken down into the constituents that your body can use and gets and stored for future use if it's not needed right now. And very closely tied up with the digestive system is the endocrine system, which again I'm going to have to deal with in a different section, because within the digestive tract you've got the liver, you've got the pancreas, which obviously is an important part of the endocrine system in terms of helping you use and absorb glucose. The gallbladder is an important part in ensuring that you can absorb and use essential fatty acids. But basically, the gut, you take food into your mouth, there are various digestive processes that go on as the food travels down the esophagus into the stomach, and the stomach is where the real digestion happens, and then by a system known as peristalsis, which basically means that the muscles are constantly, there's kind of waves of contractions that move along the gut, that literally move what's in the gut through it. As it moves through the small intestines, there's more absorption, more digestion. Then when you get to the large intestine, it's about making sure that you absorb water from your food. And then obviously at the very end is where waste food that you don't want and certain toxins that you don't want are eliminated from the body. But a lot of the problems that are associated with the digestive tract are actually associated with our emotions. I don't think it's a coincidence that we use phrases like, I have a gut feeling about this. We do feel things very much in our guts, and a symptom in the gut can have a very definite physical cause, but not all the time. There could very well be an emotional cause to it as well. Now, I've already said that I don't expect you to end up becoming really familiar with the different bits of the body. I just want you to understand, in large part, what is in different parts of your body. Because knowing what is in a particular part of the body can be important to understanding what's actually going on with the client and what could be the actual site of their illness. Now, this doesn't mean that you're giving advice or diagnosing, but if when you're giving Reiki to someone who's got irritable bowel syndrome, you find yourself very drawn to give Reiki up to the brain, which is still primarily the seat of the emotions and the thoughts that are driving the emotions, it becomes more understandable, because you will know that yes, there is often an emotional component to a problem like irritable bowel syndrome. So there's an awful lot to take in, and I think the best thing to be done is for me to leave you to read through the literature that's accompanying this video. Maybe watch the video more than once with the literature in front of you, if you feel that helps. But of course, do please prepare to come armed with lots of questions when you have your follow-up chat session with me to ensure that you've understood this module. So we'll leave that video there, and I hope that you find that interesting, useful and not too hard to understand.